좋아요, 구독!
네, 월가 트레이더 버니의 미국 주식 시간으로 돌아왔습니다. 지금 한 3주에 걸쳐서 ETF와 관련된 이야기를 전해드리고 있는데요. 오늘은 이 ETF에 대해서 사용법과 그리고 시장에서 보는 관점, 더불어서 전망까지 짚어드린다고 하니까요. ETF 투자에 관심 있으신 분들 채널 고정하시면 좋을 것 같습니다. 그럼 미국 시카고 현지에서 이야기를 해주고 계시는 버니 씨의 이야기 들어보도록 하겠습니다.
So far what we've done, looked at ETF, we've identified what they were, we've identified the different types of ETFs we can invest in, so we know the characteristics, we know the kinds of ETF investments that we can do, and then we looked at smart beta, which is inside of all those different investment styles, asset classes, different things like that. You can identify ETFs that basically try to optimize the portfolio within that space, whether it's in emerging markets, whether it's a real estate, whether it's technology, whether it's active or passive, anything like commodity-based ETF, overall stock-based ETF, and then you can use smart beta to be able to try and optimize the portfolio to outperform that particular space that ETF represents. Now what I want to do now is talk about how I use ETFs and how I think about them and what's gone on and kind of like looking ahead. So what I started out with right here is this is going back 20 years, and what we did is we broke out all the different asset classes that we can do, whether it's big US stocks, small cap stocks, emerging market companies, emerging market countries, non-US developed countries, okay, so Europe and that sort of thing, and some Asian countries. Diversified, whether it's real estate, natural resources, commodities, bonds, that sort of thing. And then compare it to cash, okay? So what we can see is I've identified the best performing space, okay, every year. And you can see it runs the gamut. So what we had for a long time was we had a stock market that basically the small cap stocks outperformed the big cap stocks year after year after year, generally speaking, okay? So you go all the way to about 2013, from 2002, and you'd have been better off being in a small cap stock fund than a big cap stock fund. But what's happened from 2017 on is we've gotten all these returns on FANG and the large big cap growth stocks, okay? And so, like, if I just break this part down, because this is how we're going to think about ETFs. If I look at 2021, okay, big cap stocks, the biggest stocks outperform the small stocks. 2020, 2019, 2018, 2017. So for the last 5 years, small cap stocks have lagged. Markets always change. And I've mentioned in previous pieces that I think that we may now be having a rally of small cap growth stocks. And so if we look forward, that's maybe where we rally. A lot of times what people look for is they know what happened last time and they want to buy it again this time. And market leaders change all the time. We used to have basically GE was a tremendous stock, okay? Did great for years and years and years. And GE is still a really big company, but their stock performance has been terrible for the last 4 or 5 years. So things change. IBM was a great stock, then IBM lagged, then IBM was I think it's now become a good stock again. Microsoft was a great stock. Then Microsoft flatlined for about 15 years, and then it became a great stock again as we got into this whole, the different expansions they've gone on from just selling their products to be able to identify networking and all the cloud computing and all the things that they do. So one of the things we want to think about is where we want that highlighted box to be, or where we think the stocks, the box is going to be better than that. So if we look at 2022, which we don't have a full year for that, these are all going to be underperforming, okay? And these are going to be right here, natural resources and commodities are going to be the ones so far that have done better in 2022. So when we look at returns right now, right? So if we look at the returns within the biggest performing ETFs, so obviously energy, natural gas, energy, they've all been the great performers within that space. When we look at the worst returns, obviously the Russia-Ukraine crisis, down, Russia, digital, okay, Bitcoin, right? Crypto technology, another one down, okay? Defiance Digital Revolution, another one down. ARK, we talked about that. ARK is all that super high growth technology. All those are the ones that have been the worst performers on the list. So what we think about now is, let's think about going forward. Let's look at the things that drive the market higher, if we're going to go higher, okay? And that is small cap growth stocks starting to outperform the whole market as a whole. Let's look at consumer discretionary and think that that's going to outperform consumer staples. If the market's going higher, those two things that we've just looked at are going to start to have a real positive effect going forward this year. Whether this is the bottom of the market or we bottom in the market in August, I don't know, but I still think that the fourth quarter of this year should be really good for the market, and the second half of the year should be positive for the market. So that's my optimistic view, and I've identified things right now that haven't occurred year to date, that have occurred in June, that are symptomatic of markets that basically are starting to identify a low. The thing that I've talked about big time before was that I didn't have enough people with a portfolio that represented that negative view of consumer sentiment that they had. The portfolios weren't as sold out as they were going forward to reflect the low negative sentiment readings that we've seen so far year to date. And on top of that, we didn't have enough put buying relative to call buying in the option space that were symptomatics of that low. We had a ton of put buying this time into this option expiration period, which might have qualified. Not as high as I'd like it, but might have qualified. But I also have to think the fact that there's a lot of people believing that we're going to go down another 20 to 40% in the stock market. And I just think that's a big ask. So I want to be able to think that there are stocks now, and I'm monitoring this, we'll monitor it on a real-time basis. There are stocks now that are trying to tell us that they've gone down enough.
좋아요, 구독!